The heavy metallic latch of a window slides open in the pre-dawn darkness of January 14, 2018. A 17-year-old girl named Jordan Turpin drops onto the cold dirt of a suburban side yard in Perris, California. She sprints down the asphalt under the amber glow of sodium streetlights, clutching a deactivated Motorola cell phone. She dials 911, gasping for air as an emergency dispatcher answers the line. She states her parents are holding her 12 siblings captive, chaining her sisters to their beds with heavy steel padlocks. Riverside County Sheriff Deputy Anthony Colas receives the dispatch near the end of a quiet overnight shift, rolling his cruiser toward a residential intersection expecting a standard runaway call. He spots a frail figure shivering in the cold and assumes he has intercepted a lost 10-year-old child. The girl raises the screen of her phone, illuminating a photograph of two young girls shackled to wooden furniture in a room caked with filth. The routine patrol stops dead, setting in motion the unearthing of a sprawling house of horrors. Before the flashing police lights illuminated Muir Woods Road, David and Louise Turpin built an impenetrable fortress of suburban normalcy. To the outside world, they presented themselves as a devout, traditional American family blessed with a massive brood of children. David held a lucrative engineering position at a prominent aerospace company, generating a steady stream of wealth that funded their spacious residential homes. The family migrated through various quiet cul-de-sacs across Texas before setting their roots in the sun-baked valleys of Southern California. Neighbors observed a quiet, peculiar couple who commanded strict obedience from their children. The parents marched all 13 siblings down neighborhood sidewalks in matching seasonal outfits, presenting a pristine image of unified domestic life. Extended relatives received glossy photographs of smiling faces posing at Disneyland, standing in front of iconic castles and riding colorful attractions. David and Louise orchestrated multiple vow renewal ceremonies in Las Vegas, lining up their children in matching plaid suits and bright dresses as a captive audience. The vibrant photographs masked a suffocating reality of absolute physical control and systematic nutritional deprivation. The outside world saw only a reclusive household oblivious to the rigid rules dictating every breath the children took behind the heavy wooden doors. The transition from Texas to California contained a series of ignored red flags that allowed the parents to maintain their unchecked authority. Years prior, the family resided in a sprawling property in the rural town of Rio Vista, Texas. When David experienced severe financial difficulties, the couple abandoned the house and allowed the property to fall into bank foreclosure. Bank inspectors and cleanup crews entered the Texas property, making a grim discovery of profound domestic squalor. The carpets were covered in animal waste, trash was piled to the ceilings, and the remains of deceased family pets were left decaying in the empty rooms. The state of the home indicated severe neglect. Yet the financial institutions treated the destruction as standard property damage. No inspector contacted Child Protective Services, and local law enforcement filed no official reports regarding the welfare of the children who had lived in such toxic conditions. This glaring disconnect in the justice system gave David and Louise a clean slate to cross state lines without a single mark on their criminal record. They arrived in the Inland Empire region of Southern California, unburdened by past investigations, bringing their hidden captives into a fresh legal jurisdiction. The failure of authorities in Texas to look beyond the financial loss guaranteed the children would suffer for another decade. The sheer duration of this captivity in California relied on a glaring failure within the educational framework of the state. David Turpin discovered a massive bureaucratic blind spot in the California homeschooling regulations, exploiting a system built entirely on blind trust. He filled out a standard state affidavit to register his private residence as a formal educational facility, naming it the Sandcastle Day School. The California Department of Education required 0 physical inspections of the premises, mandated no background checks for the designated principal, and asked no questions about the academic curriculum. David listed himself as the headmaster, placing a legal shield of privacy around the four walls of his suburban property. This simple piece of paperwork erased the 13 children from the public eye. Without a public school system to mandate daily attendance, the siblings vanished from the sight of mandatory reporters. No teachers existed to notice their profound malnourishment, and no school counselors remained available to spot the visible bruising on their fragile wrists. The legal structure designed to offer parents educational freedom instead handed a predator the keys to build a private detention center in a sprawling housing tract. The local authorities remained oblivious to the phantom school operating in their own jurisdiction. Inside the fabricated school, the 13 siblings endured an existence stripped of basic human dignity. The victims ranged in age from a 2-year-old toddler to a 29-year-old adult. Yet a forced nocturnal schedule isolated them from the sun. The parents forced the children to sleep through the daylight hours and remain awake all night, severing any chance of visual contact with passing neighbors. David and Louise inflicted specific psychological torment by placing desired objects just out of physical reach. They purchased large quantities of fresh food, setting sweet pies and fresh fruit on the kitchen counters, then forbade the starving children from taking a single bite. Unopened toys remained in their original plastic packaging, sitting on shelves as permanent reminders of a childhood they could never experience. The siblings lacked fundamental exposure to the outside world, possessing no understanding of basic concepts like medication, police officers, or standard dental care. They memorized the contours of their squalid bedrooms, seeking comfort in their shared survival, while their parents feasted and accumulated massive credit card debt. The children clung to a collective hope for rescue, drawing strength from quiet whispers in the dark when their parents slept. Their resilience simmered in the shadows for decades until a single spark of information breached the perimeter of the home. The meticulously constructed facade began to splinter from the inside when 17-year-old Jordan located a discarded smartphone buried in the clutter of the house. The device lacked an active cellular network plan, but the internal wireless antenna remained highly functional. It managed to connect to the active internet router pulsing in the living room, bridging the gap between the domestic prison and the digital world. Under the cover of darkness while her parents slept, Jordan accessed online video platforms and began absorbing the reality of the outside world. She watched clips of teenagers walking through shopping malls, eating hot meals, and speaking without fear of physical retribution. She consumed music videos and observed the natural cadence of human interaction, realizing the violence and starvation in her home were not normal aspects of life. These digital windows provided a stark contrast to the filth, heavy chains, and gnawing hunger defining her daily existence. Jordan learned the specific legal definitions of abuse and neglect, piecing together the terrifying truth that her parents were dangerous criminals rather than strict guardians. The phone became a lifeline of forbidden knowledge, transforming her confusion into a crystalline sense of purpose. She began documenting the horrors of the household, using the phone camera to capture clear images of her sisters shackled to their beds. Armed with undeniable photographic proof, Jordan sought out one of her older sisters to begin drafting an impossible survival strategy. The two siblings spent 2 entire years whispering in the dark, analyzing the rigid sleep patterns of their mother and father. They mapped out the spatial layout of the Muir Woods Road property, identifying the location of every motion sensor, heavy lock, and electronic alarm keypad. The girls knew they had only one chance to execute an escape, as a failed attempt would result in severe physical retribution and tighter steel chains. They debated the physical distances they would need to run, trying to comprehend the layout of a neighborhood they had seen only through closed window blinds. Their isolation was so profound that they did not know the exact street address of their own home, nor did they fully understand how an emergency dispatch system operated. Despite these immense knowledge gaps, they formulated a step-by-step procedure to breach the front door and locate an authority figure. The older sister focused on mapping the interior obstacles, while Jordan prepared herself for the terrifying prospect of speaking to strangers. The two girls operated with military precision, keeping their intentions hidden from their younger siblings to prevent any accidental slip of the tongue. They waited for a moment of distraction, letting the calendar pages turn as they refined their exit route. Their calculated patience shattered into sheer panic during the first week of 2018. Jordan stood frozen in a hallway, pressing her ear to the drywall as she eavesdropped on a conversation between her mother and father. Louise Turpin spoke with enthusiasm about packing up the entire household and moving the family thousands of miles away to the state of Oklahoma. Jordan understood the vast rural landscapes of the American Midwest would provide her parents with even deeper geographic isolation. If the family relocated to a property far from paved roads and suburban neighbors, any hope of a future rescue would evaporate. The thought of being dragged into a remote wilderness without the proximity of emergency services pushed Jordan past the point of hesitation. She relayed the devastating news to her older sister, and the two agreed they could no longer afford the luxury of waiting for a perfect opportunity. They established a firm deadline, choosing to execute their escape plan the very next morning before their parents could load the moving vans. The girls gathered their courage as the house fell silent, knowing capture would result in a permanent end to their physical freedom. The stakes escalated into a frantic fight for survival, forcing a sheltered teenager to challenge a lifetime of absolute subjugation. The morning of January 14 arrived with a biting chill, settling over the sprawling housing tract in Paris. Jordan and her 13-year-old sister crept toward a designated ground floor window, their bare feet stepping over mounds of garbage and discarded clothes. As they approached the final physical barrier between their prison and the outside world, the younger sibling looked out into the vast dark expanse of the neighborhood. A profound terror gripped the 13-year-old, paralyzing her with the fear of the unknown and the certain wrath of her parents should they fail. She broke down in silent tears, turning back toward the suffocating safety of her squalid bedroom. Jordan stood alone at the precipice, facing the agonizing choice of abandoning her sister or condemning all 13 siblings to the impending move to Oklahoma. She chose to bear the weight of their collective salvation, determined to bring authorities back to the house. Drawing on 2 years of meticulous observation, Jordan bypassed the magnetic sensor of the window alarm, ensuring the electronic chime remained silent. She pushed the glass open, hoisted her frail body over the sill, and tumbled onto the frost-covered grass of the front yard, taking a final glance at the darkened facade of the Sandcastle Day School. The teenager tightened her grip on the deactivated phone and sprinted into the void. Deputy Anthony Colas parks his patrol cruiser near a desolate intersection just out of sight of the target neighborhood. He steps onto the cold asphalt to intercept the frantic caller, expecting to find an ordinary runaway child. Jordan Turpin stands shivering in the darkness, wearing a soiled shirt and emitting a strong odor of unwashed decay. The officer observes her frail frame and estimates her age at 10 years old. She corrects his assumption, stating she is 17 years old and needs immediate help for her siblings. Jordan lifts the screen of her deactivated Motorola device, presenting the digital evidence she captured hours prior. Cola studies the glowing photographs of 2 pale girls bound to wooden bed frames with thick steel chains. The visual proof shatters any standard protocol for a routine domestic dispute. The deputy realizes a massive crime is unfolding merely blocks away from his current location. He radios dispatch to request heavy tactical backup and medical personnel to stage at a secure perimeter. Officers form a staging area a half-mile down the street, analyzing the geographical layout of the suburban tract. The distance between their staging point and 160 Muir Woods Road consists of winding residential roads filled with sleeping families. A convoy of silent patrol vehicles glides through the quiet streets, cutting their headlights to avoid alerting the suspects. The officers park several houses away from the primary address and approach the property on foot. They observe a standard 2-story suburban structure, with multiple vehicles parked in the driveway and all window coverings drawn tight. Detectives step onto the front porch, navigating a critical legal threshold regarding the Fourth Amendment. Without a signed search warrant, law enforcement must rely on the exigent circumstances generated by Jordan or secure voluntary consent from the homeowners. A senior officer knocks heavy knuckles on the solid wood door, shattering the quiet morning air. David Turpin opens the door moments later, presenting an aura of absolute calm and supreme arrogance. He raises an eyebrow at the uniform presence, feigning complete ignorance regarding the whereabouts of his teenage daughter. Louise Turpin emerges from the background, joining her husband to form a united defensive front. The parents insist their children are safe, asleep, and legally homeschooled within the premises. The detectives press forward, demanding visual confirmation of the remaining 12 siblings to ensure their physical welfare. Realizing their fabricated reality is collapsing, the suspects surrender their position at the door and grant the officers entry. The moment the investigators cross the threshold, an overwhelming sensory assault forces them to gag. A thick, suffocating stench of human waste, rotting trash, and stale air permeates every corner of the residence. Detectives illuminate their flashlights, sweeping the beams across mounds of decaying garbage piled high against the hallway walls. The physical layout of the first floor reveals a stark contrast between a functioning home and a desolate containment zone. The kitchen counters hold displays of fresh fruit and untouched sweet pies, arranged to taunt the starving inhabitants. Officers execute a room-by-room search, calling out into the pitch-black darkness of the lower level. They locate several younger victims huddled in corners, their bodies caked in dirt and their eyes wide with unfamiliar terror. The heavy metallic clink of steel draws the attention of law enforcement toward the darkened bedrooms. Investigators locate the physical restraint systems attached to the furniture, matching the exact chains depicted in the digital photographs. The thick padlocks secure heavy chains directly to the wooden bedposts, displaying extreme wear from years of constant use. Officers confirm the environment matches the grim narrative provided by the escaped teenager. The lead detective declares the residence an active crime scene, freezing all movement within the house. The search team proceeds up the carpeted staircase to secure the second level of the property. They push open the doors to the upstairs bedrooms, uncovering the most devastating layer of the systematic abuse. Law enforcement officers discover the remaining older siblings hidden in the gloom, physically stunted beyond comprehension. The severe nutritional deprivation forces the investigators into a massive cognitive shock. They observe adult victims in their late 20s possessing the skeletal frames and heights of elementary school students. The oldest female sibling, aged 29 years old, weighs a mere 82 pounds and lacks the physical strength to stand unassisted. Several siblings bear deep, unhealed marks around their wrists and ankles, confirming the frequent use of tight industrial restraints. The officers find no evidence of running water usage in the bathrooms, noting dry sinks and bathtubs filled with assorted debris. The victims exhibit severe muscle wasting, forced to crawl or shuffle due to years of physical confinement in small spaces. Recognizing the extreme fragility of the survivors, the police command center dispatches an emergency fleet of ambulances to the property. Medical personnel arrive with stretchers, initiating a delicate extraction process to remove the siblings from the toxic environment. The pristine exterior of the suburban neighborhood transforms into a massive triage center as the sun begins to rise. The Riverside County authorities transport the 13 victims to designated medical facilities across the region. doctors and forensic pediatricians take over the physical evaluation, uncovering decades of hidden medical neglect. The siblings undergo urgent examinations revealing profound vitamin deficiencies, severe cognitive impairments, and extensive tooth decay. None of the victims possess a fundamental understanding of basic hygiene. Having never received access to a dentist or a proper medical doctor, the forensic teams document dirt embedded deep within their skin, confirming a strict household rule that allowed only one shower per year. Medical professionals note the extreme psychological conditioning inflicted upon the survivors. The siblings flinch at sudden movements and maintain a strict nocturnal schedule, struggling to stay awake during the daylight hours. Hospital staff must dim the lights in the recovery wards, creating a dark environment to prevent overwhelming sensory overload. Nutritionists implement specialized feeding protocols, aware that introducing standard meals too fast could trigger a fatal metabolic shock in their starved bodies. The medical evaluation firmly establishes the precise timeline of starvation, proving the physical torment spanned across multiple decades and state lines. The staggering physical evidence strips away any potential defense strategy David and Louise Turpin might employ regarding accidental neglect. As the medical stabilization progresses, criminal investigators face a monumental legal and psychological challenge. Detectives need formal testimonies to secure major felony charges, requiring them to interview 13 individuals with severe linguistic deficits. The victims lack a fundamental vocabulary to describe their surroundings or the nature of their captivity. They possess zero knowledge of standard societal concepts, asking the officers to explain the meaning of words like medication and police. Law enforcement agencies deploy specialized forensic interviewers trained in early childhood trauma to speak with the adult victims. The interviewers build a strict foundation of trust using basic visual aids and gentle tones to extract the horrifying chronology without leading the witnesses. The siblings reveal the strict enforcement of rules, explaining how their parents utilized heavy chains as a standard punishment for washing hands above the wrist. They describe the agonizing psychological torture of watching their parents consume elaborate meals while their own stomachs fed on their muscle tissue. The survivors recount the absolute prohibition against touching the new toys stacked in the hallways, turning everyday objects into instruments of mental torment. Through broken sentences and simple drawings, the victims construct a flawless evidentiary timeline for the prosecution. The collection of these fragile statements bridges the gap between the physical squalor of the house and the precise criminal intent of the parents. Armed with undeniable medical documentation and unified witness testimonies, the authorities solidify an unbreakable case against the predators. While the hospital interviews conclude, crime scene technicians execute a sweeping forensic search of Wynton 60 Muir Woods Road. Investigators catalog hundreds of separate items of evidence, mapping the physical layout of the domestic prison. They collect the thick steel chains, the heavy brass padlocks, and the soiled restraints attached directly to the bedroom furniture. Technicians discover hundreds of handwritten journals hidden among the trash, penned by the victims over many years. These fragile notebooks provide a flawless real-time historical record of the daily starvation, the physical beatings, and the desperate hopes of the children. The forensic team documents the glaring discrepancy between the squalid children quarters and the pristine master bedroom. The parents maintained a luxurious sleeping space for themselves, complete with clean linens, modern electronics, and closets filled with expensive clothing. This stark physical contrast destroys any legal argument claiming the family suffered from shared financial poverty. The evidence proves David and Louise Turpin possessed ample resources and willfully chose to divert those funds away from their offspring. Law enforcement officials bundle the mountain of physical proof, transferring the journals, the chains, and the medical reports to the district attorney. The sheer volume of the verified data guarantees the prosecution holds absolute leverage over the perpetrators. The exhaustive investigation officially closes the perimeter around the suburban fortress, sealing the fate of the couple waiting in the county jail. The morning sun breaches the horizon of the Inland Empire, casting a sterile light across the manicured lawns of Muir Woods Road. Riverside County Sheriff deputies establish a rigid perimeter around the suburban property, securing the geographic footprint of the sprawling crime scene. Detectives march David and Louise Turpin out through the heavy wooden front door, securing their wrists in tight steel handcuffs. The distance from the concrete porch to the waiting patrol cruisers measures less than 50 feet, yet this physical walk shatters a decades-long illusion of standard domestic life. Neighbors step out from their homes in the early daylight, watching the coordinated police extraction unfold in absolute disbelief. These bystanders stare in stunned silence, having lived mere yards away without ever seeing the complete roster of the 13 captive siblings. The surrounding community witnesses the physical collapse of the fabricated Sandcastle Day School, comprehending the terrifying truth that a prominent aerospace engineer operated a domestic prison in plain sight. Officers place the suspects in the rear compartments of the secure patrol vehicles, severing their physical dominance over the broken household. The heavy metal doors of the police cruisers slam shut, echoing across the cold asphalt and signaling the definitive end of the captivity. Law enforcement vehicles transport the perpetrators away from the suburban tract, leaving the street blanketed in a profound sense of communal dread. The elaborate fortress of isolation crumbles under the precise execution of standard police procedure. Inside the residence, forensic specialists catalog the specific instruments of psychological control scattered throughout the living quarters. Investigators document the pristine conditions of the master bedroom, noting the vast collection of expensive clothing, clean linens, and modern electronics belonging to the parents. This luxurious private space sits in stark contrast to the foul, dark containment rooms designed for the children just down the hall. Detectives photograph the untouched sweet pies sitting on the kitchen counters and the unopened toys left in plain sight on the living room shelves. These everyday items stand as concrete proof of calculated malice, demonstrating how David and Louise weaponized basic human desires to break the spirits of their captives. The final group of medical transport personnel navigates the narrow, trash-filled hallways to reach the remaining adult victims on the second floor. Paramedics lift a frail 82-pound, 29-year-old woman onto a mobile stretcher, securing her fragile frame for the journey outside. The extraction teams carry the remaining survivors out into the morning air, exposing their pale skin to direct sunlight for the first time in countless years. The physical removal of the 13th victim marks the official termination of the domestic horror. The systematic starvation, the heavy padlocks, and the forced nocturnal isolation dissolve under the overwhelming presence of competent medical authorities. The sprawling suburban house transforms from an impenetrable private fortress into an empty shell of documented physical evidence. Law enforcement seals the perimeter with heavy yellow tape, preserving the squalor for the impending legal battle. The booking process at the Riverside County Detention Center strips David and Louise Turpin of their manufactured authority. Custody deputies mandate the removal of their civilian clothing, issuing standard prison garments and confiscating their personal belongings. Technicians roll the fingers of the suspects across the digital fingerprint scanners, entering their biometric data into the National Criminal Database. During the intake procedures, the demeanor of the parents shifts from supreme arrogance to a quiet, calculating silence. Detectives place the couple in separate concrete holding cells, denying them the ability to coordinate a unified defense strategy. Investigators observe their physical reactions through the security cameras. noting the complete absence of parental concern for the 13 children sent to emergency trauma wards. The suspects request no information regarding the medical status of their offspring, prioritizing their own legal preservation over the welfare of the victims. This glaring lack of empathy provides law enforcement with a profound psychological profile of the perpetrators. The police understand they are dealing with calculated predators who view their children as mere possessions rather than human beings. The rigid structure of the county jail imposes a strict schedule upon the couple, reversing the dynamic of control they wielded for decades. The architects of the Muir Woods Road prison experience the cold reality of absolute confinement. The rescue operation sends massive shock waves through the local government structure, forcing state officials to confront a staggering systemic failure. Investigators review the California Department of Education records, analyzing the specific legal loopholes that facilitated the invisible captivity. The simple filing of a private school affidavit allowed a wealthy engineer to circumvent all mandatory welfare checks and standard educational requirements. The lack of compulsory home inspections granted David Turpin the absolute authority to lock his doors and erase his entire family from public existence. Protective service workers realized the rigid protocols governing private education created an impenetrable shield for a relentless predator. This administrative blind spot exposes the terrifying truth that written regulations hold no power without physical enforcement. The community grapples with the understanding that immense wealth and a quiet demeanor provide the perfect camouflage for profound depravity. Neighbors question their own past observations, realizing the matching outfits and staged holiday photographs served as deliberate misdirection. The realization settles over the neighborhood that extreme danger does not always hide in dark alleys or abandoned industrial warehouses. Predators can reside behind the neat hedges and painted front doors of a middle-class subdivision. The culmination of the police investigation shifts the focus from physical rescue to the pursuit of absolute moral justice within the complex court system. Riverside County District Attorney Mike Hestrin takes command of the prosecution, launching an aggressive legal campaign against the perpetrators. Hestrin reviews the massive mountain of physical evidence, analyzing the thick steel chains, the medical reports of severe malnutrition, and the handwritten journals recovered from the crime scene. The sheer volume of forensic data provides the prosecution with an undeniable narrative of sustained physical and psychological torture. The prosecutors spend weeks cataloging the timeline of abuse, ensuring every constraint and every instance of starvation carries a specific legal consequence. The district attorney files dozens of major felony charges against David and Louise Turpin, guaranteeing the scope of the indictment matches the staggering severity of the crimes. The formal charges include torture, false imprisonment, child abuse, and the abuse of a dependent adult. During the initial arraignment proceedings, the couple stands before a superior court judge and enters formal pleas of not guilty, clinging to a shattered facade of innocence. The defense attorneys attempt to parse the charges, searching for procedural errors or weak testimonies to exploit in front of a jury. The prosecution counters this strategy by maintaining a rigid stance, refusing to offer leniency or reduce the severity of the felony counts. The overwhelming weight of the documented physical evidence forces the predators into a legal corner from which they cannot mount a viable defense. The legal defense faces an insurmountable barrier of verified facts, realizing a public trial would expose the parents to devastating public scrutiny. The defense attorneys examined the unified testimonies of the 13 siblings and the flawless evidentiary timeline constructed by the forensic interviewers. The hundreds of handwritten journals found in the trash serve as undeniable, concatenated accounts of the sustained starvation and the physical beatings. The extreme cognitive stunting and the 82-pound weight of a 29-year-old victim eliminate any potential argument of accidental parental neglect. Faced with the absolute certainty of a conviction and the prospect of their victims testifying in open court, David and Louise Turpin abandon their claims of innocence. The legal maneuverings conclude in a quiet courtroom during February of the year 2019. The couple pleads guilty to 14 distinct felony charges, accepting legal responsibility for decades of unimaginable cruelty. This sudden capitulation prevents the 13 survivors from enduring the trauma of a prolonged public trial. The guilty pleas cement the historical record, proving the parents enacted a calculated, decades-long campaign of domestic terror. The justice system secures an ironclad conviction without forcing the fragile victims to face their abusers from a witness stand. The court schedules a final date to determine the precise duration of their incarceration. 2 months later, the Riverside County Superior Court convenes for the official sentencing hearing, drawing intense attention from the global media. Several of the rescued siblings stand before the presiding judge, delivering powerful impact statements that detail their immense suffering and their newfound strength. The survivors speak of broken chains, stolen childhoods, and an unbreakable will to forge their own independent futures. The judge addresses the perpetrators in the silent courtroom, condemning their actions as selfish, cruel, and devoid of basic human empathy.